Now that we made a distinction between being bilingual and being an interpreter, let's dive into what makes court interpreters' requirements tougher because they're more strict. Well, first of all, we have to understand a bilingual person does not do simultaneous interpreting in general during their everyday life. And even when you're interpreting for your friends or relative, you use the consecutive. What happens if you have to do simultaneous, which we know must be used by court interpreters in court proceedings? What does an interpreter do when they are doing simultaneous interpretation? Well, they're listening to a message in a language. Any language, could it be English or non-English? That language means that those sounds are a code that only a person that can decipher that code can understand. So the interpreter has to decipher the message in their own mind from the language that it was heard, the source language. Then they have to retain that message in the short-term memory for a second so they can have a time to reconstruct it into the correct conceptual and language equivalents in the other language. In other words, they're going to transfer one language to another still in their head. And now that interpreter must deliver that message orally while still listening and retaining the message and monitoring what the interpreter is saying all at the same time. VC says that interpreters use in the simultaneous mode different cognitive skills, as many as 22 depending on who you ask. So do you, the interpreter, do you have what it takes to be a court interpreter? We in De La Mora have developed this system in which talk about the triad, the three basic components of a solid foundation for a court interpreter. First, and we talked about this the most, you mustn't have language expertise. The interpreter must be able to navigate from high-level register to low-level, from sophisticated language to colloquial language, and the language expertise level in both languages should be equivalent to a 2-year college degree. Interpreters must have some talent. All of us discover early in life that we have talent for certain things and not others. Not everybody can be a basketball player, and I'm sure you know people who are tall and theoretically should be very good at basketball and are not. You have to have some talent. I personally don't have much talent for music. I love music. I would love to be a pianist, but I tried it. It was not my gig. You have to have some talent, and I don't think that we can teach talent. People discover talent. Now, of course, the level of sophistication and the talent required to do things varies with the demands of your performance. For instance, when you're a kid, when you go play baseball in the Little League, you don't require a lot of talent, but funny enough, there's going to be kids with more talents that are better players. As the demands on the game, as the level of sophistication and talent of the other players go up, then less players can play the game at that level. That's why even though we have millions of people playing football at a flag football leagues and at a very, like those Friday night kikes, by the time you get to the NFL, you can only make the roster of 32 professional teams. So from millions of kids to a few people that make that level. In interpretation, we have levels too. It's not the same, as I said, to interpret for your mom in a simple shopping or let's go to the market situation as being in a court of law. Court of law interpretation is quite demanding, so your talent has to shine. And of course, you have to have technique. This connection is what makes a good interpreter. And we have discovered too, and this is one of the main reasons why we're having this training for you now, because we found that some people definitely had the language expertise, the two languages at very good level. They had talent because they were brave enough. They had public speaking abilities. They were ready to go and interpret in a court of law, but they were not very good interpreters because they had no training. They had no technique. This is what we are encouraging you to do. If you have the language expertise, if you have the talent, acquire the interpreting techniques and you will be a very good court interpreter. You have to have ability, knowledge, and skills. So I talked about talent. What is talent? Well, according to the dictionary is a natural endowment of a person, according to Merriam-Webster. It's something you are born with. You have that talent, that gift. What is an interpreter's natural ability? Well, the most famous one, multitasking skills. You can do two things or more at the same time. Highly recommended if you're going to be in this field. The talent to interpret is clear when you see that a person that is doing simultaneous interpretation or consecutive is going to be able to listen to a speech in a source language with specific context, legal or otherwise, then fully comprehend that message in the source language, and then transfer it to the other language, first in your mind and then orally. You have to take notes, and you have to deliver the complete message in the target language, keeping emotion, tone of voice, and register. It's quite a feat, actually. So you require fluency. We talked about what fluency you required. Well, but we also required fluency. Either it's your native language A fluency or your language B acquired fluency. The truth of the matter is that fluency has to connect in the sense that you have to be able to say what you can think at any level, from the baby level to the academic level. You have to have linguistic level at the academic in both languages. It would be ideal if everybody could have a PhD in both languages, but as we said before, we must be able to produce both languages at an academic level, at least of an associate's degree. Why? Because think about it. To be an interpreter, you have to be able to understand nuances. You have to be able to understand double entendre. You have to be able to understand sarcasm. Also, you have to be familiar and able to transfer meaning with idioms, proverbs, sayings, and legal matters. Judicial interpreters, therefore, must know, need to know, the ins and outs of the legal profession. Where do you go? Who works in the courtroom? Who are these people that I'm going to be talking to? We're going to talk about this in our next section. What types of courts? Is it going to be civil or criminal? And is it family law? Are we talking about maybe divorce versus a criminal matter? What kind of proceedings are there in each one of the courts? Especially in criminal law, we need to be aware of what kind of proceeding is it. You have to understand in criminal law you could start from an arraignment or even a initial appearance all the way to a trial. If you're participating as an interpreter in a court proceeding, what are the other parties that are going to be involved in the legal matters? And obviously all these things that I'm mentioning, are you able to interpret that into your language of expertise? What level of offenses exist? General legal jargon. What's a motion? I remember distinctly when I started working as a court interpreter, hearing the words battery on a Leo. That really threw me off because I didn't know if they were talking about the zodiac or what. Battery on a Leo? You know what that means? In Florida, it's very common, and it means battery on a law enforcement officer. The first time I heard it, I was completely thrown off. You have to be familiar with legal jargon. You have to be then familiar with interpreting strategies and techniques. It's not only your talent that you have to rely on, you have to be trained. Interpreting techniques are the toolkit for interpreters. Interpreters then use this toolkit to make decisions consciously about how do you transfer the message. Because us interpreters, we listen to the message in the source language. And now, while we're understanding it, we have to make several decisions. How do we process that information? We have to store that in a short-term memory. Are we going to save it? Are we going to change the word order? What are we going to do with this information? How are we going to deliver it? We're going to have to take notes and decide what to include in our notes, because, as we will see in the note-taking part of the presentation, you can't write down everything. So what should you include in your note-taking? And interpreters must pace themselves while delivering the same message in the target language. In other words, they retrieve it from their short-term memory, so they empty that space to put in the new information while they're delivering the previous message. Finally, for this section, make sure to visit the Language Services Program of the Supreme Court of Ohio website and print your CORN interpreter bench notes. You must study them, navigate, and make sure you are familiar with the terms and the proceedings explained in those places. For your convenience, the CORN interpreter bench notes link is on your lesson plan. This is the end of this section. We'll see you on the next presentation.